The letter arrived at Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight on August 15th, 1978. It was addressed to Reginald KRAY, prisoner number 058110, currently serving a life sentence for murder. The envelope was plain, the handwriting careful and precise. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that would make even a hardened gangster pause. Dear Mr. KRAY, I've been watching you. I know your routines. I know when you exercise, when you eat, when you're vulnerable. I've eliminated 17 people in my life. All of them deserved it, just like you deserve it. You're a murderer who thinks he's untouchable even in prison. I'm going to prove you're not. We'll meet soon. And when we do, you'll understand what real fear feels like. Yours, in anticipation, a friend. The prison guards who screened Reggie's mail flagged the letter immediately, took it to the warden. The warden read it, recognized it as a credible threat, and called a meeting with senior prison staff. This isn't some random inmate making threats, the warden said. This is calculated, professional. We need to find out who sent it and isolate them immediately. But before they could investigate, the sender revealed himself. 3 days after the letter arrived, during afternoon recreation time in the prison yard, a man approached Reggie KRAY. The man was named Peter Sullivan. He was 43 years old, 6 feet tall, lean and fit. He'd been in Parkhurst for 6 years, convicted of multiple murders. But unlike most murderers, Peter wasn't a gangster or a criminal. He was a serial killer, a man who'd spent nearly 2 decades hunting and eliminating people he considered evil before finally being caught. And now, standing in the prison yard with dozens of inmates and guards around, Peter Sullivan walked up to Reggie KRAY and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're Reggie KRAY, the famous gangster, the man everyone's supposed to be afraid of. I'm not afraid of you. In fact, I'm going to do to you what you've done to so many others. I'm going to end you, right here in this prison. Just a matter of when." Every inmate in the yard stopped what they were doing, turned to watch. This was unprecedented, someone directly threatening one of the KRAY twins. In prison, in front of witnesses. Either Peter Sullivan was insane, or he was confident he could follow through on his threat. Reggie looked at Peter and smiled, not a nervous smile, not a scared smile, the same calm, knowing smile he'd used before destroying people who'd challenged him. The smile that meant, you just made a terrible mistake. You don't know it yet, but you will. Okay, Reggie said quietly. Let's talk. Privately. Just you and me. 10 minutes. Then we'll see who should really be afraid. This is the story of what happened when a serial killer threatened Reggie KRAY in prison. The story of the 10-minute conversation that followed. And the story of why, by the end of that conversation, Peter Sullivan was the one who was terrified, not of violence, but of something much worse. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Peter Sullivan was. Peter wasn't a typical criminal. He came from a middle-class family in Manchester. His father was a doctor, his mother a schoolteacher. Peter was educated, intelligent, articulate. He'd done well in school, attended university, studied psychology and criminology. But Peter had a dark obsession. He believed that evil people deserved to die. Not just murderers or violent criminals. Anyone Peter judged as morally corrupt, as harmful to society, as fundamentally bad. Peter's first victim was his university roommate in 1959. The roommate had been accused of assaulting a female student. The accusation hadn't led to charges, insufficient evidence. But Peter believed his roommate was guilty, believed he'd gotten away with a terrible crime. So Peter eliminated him, made it look like a suicide. The death was ruled as such. No investigation, no suspicion. That success convinced Peter he'd found his calling. Over the next 13 years, Peter eliminated 16 more people, each one carefully selected, each one someone Peter judged as evil and deserving of death. A businessman who'd cheated elderly people out of their savings, a teacher suspected of inappropriate behavior with students, a landlord who'd illegally evicted poor families, a doctor who'd prescribed unnecessary surgeries for profit, and 13 others, all people. Peter had judged and sentenced to death in his own mind. Peter was methodical, patient, careful. He'd research his targets for months, learn their routines, wait for the perfect opportunity, make their deaths look like accidents, suicides, or natural causes. But in 1972, Peter made a mistake. He eliminated a local politician he believed was corrupt. But the politician's death triggered a major investigation. Police found evidence linking Peter to the scene, found other evidence connecting him to previous deaths. Peter was arrested, charged with 5 murders, the cases where evidence was strongest. Convicted in 1973, sentenced to life in prison with a recommendation he serve at least 30 years before being considered for parole. Peter arrived at Parkhurst Prison in 1974, and for 4 years he'd been a model prisoner, quiet, respectful, kept to himself, caused no trouble. But privately, Peter had been studying the other prisoners, particularly the violent criminals, the gangsters, the men who'd hurt innocent people and showed no remorse. And Reggie KRAY, famous gangster, convicted murderer, man who'd terrorized at London for years, was at the top of Peter's list of people who deserved to be eliminated. Peter Sullivan's threat wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. He'd spent months planning how to eliminate Reggie KRAY inside Parkhurst Prison. But Peter had made a crucial miscalculation. He'd studied Reggie's criminal history, knew about the murders, the violence, the brutality. But Peter had studied Reggie as a case study, as an example of criminal psychology. What Peter hadn't understood was that Reggie KRAY had decades of experience dealing with threats, had faced down rivals, enemies, people who wanted him dead, had survived in one of the most dangerous criminal underworlds in the world through intelligence, strategic thinking, and psychological warfare. Peter thought he was the predator, and Reggie was the prey. But Reggie understood something Peter didn't. In prison, reputation and psychology mattered more than physical capability. And Reggie's reputation was his greatest weapon. When Peter made his public threat in the prison yard, Reggie's response The calm acceptance, the invitation to talk privately, caught Peter off guard. He'd expected Reggie to either back down or respond with threats of his own. The measured response suggested something Peter hadn't anticipated. Reggie wasn't afraid. At all. Guards separated Reggie and Peter after the initial confrontation, told them both to return to their cells. But Reggie requested a meeting with the warden. "This man, Peter Sullivan, has threatened me," Reggie said. "I could handle it the usual way, have my people in here deal with it, but that causes problems for everyone. Instead, I'm requesting permission to talk to him. Privately. In a supervised setting. Let me try to resolve this with conversation before it becomes violence." The warden was skeptical. "You want to talk to a man who just threatened to kill you?" "Yes, because I think I can make him understand why that's a bad idea. Give me 10 minutes with him. If it doesn't work, you can separate us permanently, but I think I can handle this peacefully." The warden agreed, partly because he was curious, partly because avoiding violence in the prison was always preferable, and partly because he understood that Reggie KRAY, despite being a prisoner, still commanded respect and had a reputation for being smart. The meeting was arranged for the next day. A small room, 2 chairs, 2 guards outside. Reggie and Peter would have 10 minutes to talk. Peter Sullivan walked into the meeting room expecting confrontation, expected Reggie to threaten him, to try to intimidate him, to use the same tactics that had worked on gangsters and criminals. But Reggie didn't do any of that. He was sitting calmly in one of the chairs, gestured for Peter to sit in the other. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Reggie said politely. "I wanted to talk because I think we have a misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up." Peter sat down, wary. "There's no misunderstanding. I told you exactly what I intend to do." "I know what you intend. I read your letter. Very articulate, by the way. Well written. But before you go through with your intention, I think you should understand something about me, about who I really am versus who you think I am. I know who you are. Reggie KRAY, East End gangster, multiple murders, protection rackets, violence, terror. You hurt innocent people for money and power." Reggie nodded slowly. "That's partially true. I was involved in violence. I did hurt people. I'm not denying that or claiming to be innocent. But the key word you used was innocent. Let me ask you something. How many innocent people do you think I actually hurt? Based on your criminal history? Dozens, maybe hundreds. Wrong. Every person I hurt, every person I was involved in harming, was in the criminal world. Rival gangsters, people who'd betrayed the organization, other criminals who'd crossed lines. I never hurt ordinary people, never hurt civilians, never hurt anyone who wasn't involved in the life." Peter looked skeptical. "That's what all criminals say, that they only hurt other criminals. It's what some criminals say. But in my case, it's true. Look at the evidence. Look at my convictions. Look at who the victims were. Every single one was involved in organized crime. Not one civilian. Not one innocent person. Because that was my line. The line I wouldn't cross. You still hurt people. You still caused suffering. Yes, I did, and I'm paying for it. I'm serving a life sentence. I'll probably die in this prison. I've accepted that. But here's what you need to understand. The people I hurt, they knew what world they were in. They knew the rules. They made choices to be in that world. And sometimes they paid the consequences. But you're talking about hurting me. And I haven't done anything to you, haven't threatened you, haven't hurt anyone you care about. So what you're planning isn't justice, it's just violence. You'd be no different from the people you claim to hate. Peter leaned forward. I've studied your case, KRAY. I know about the people you've eliminated. I know about the fear you created. You're trying to manipulate me right now with words, but I can see through it. Reggie smiled. Good. You should be skeptical. That shows intelligence, but let me ask you something. You've eliminated 17 people in your life, correct? That's what you wrote in your letter. Peter hesitated, then nodded. Yes. And you eliminated them because you judged them as evil, as deserving of death. You appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner. That's the role you took on. Someone had to. The legal system failed. These people were hurting others and getting away with it. I understand that thinking. But here's the problem. Who judges you? You're eliminating people based on your personal moral code. But what if your moral code is wrong? What if you've eliminated people who didn't actually deserve it? Who makes that determination? I'm careful, I research, I make sure. But you're not infallible. You're human. You make mistakes. For example, you're in here for eliminating a politician you thought was corrupt. Were you right? Was he actually corrupt? Or did you eliminate an innocent man based on incomplete information? Peter's face tightened. This was the question that had haunted him since his conviction. The politician he'd eliminated, the case that had gotten him caught, had been investigated posthumously, and the investigation had found no evidence of the corruption Peter had believed existed. Peter had possibly eliminated an innocent man, had judged wrong, had made a fatal error. I see that hit a nerve, Reggie said quietly. You're not sure anymore, are you? Not sure if you were right about him. And if you were wrong about him, maybe you were wrong about others too. That's different from your situation. Is it? You judge me as evil and deserving of death, but you don't actually know me, don't know my full story, don't know the complexities of what I did and why. You're making the same judgment you've made before, deciding someone deserves to die based on incomplete information. Here's what I want you to consider. Maybe your moral certainty isn't as reliable as you think. Maybe the role you've taken on, deciding who lives and dies, more complicated than you've acknowledged. And maybe, just maybe, you need to reconsider whether you're qualified to make these judgments. Peter sat back in his chair, processing what Reggie had said. He'd expected threats, intimidation, violence. Instead, he was getting psychology, philosophy, questions that cut to the core of his entire identity. You're trying to confuse me, Peter said. Make me doubt myself. No, I'm trying to make you think, really think, about what you're planning to do and why. But let me move on to something more practical. Consequences. You say you're going to eliminate me. Let's assume you succeed. You manage to do it. You eliminate me here in Parkhurst. What happens next? I complete my mission. Remove evil from the world. And then what? You think it ends there? Let me educate you about how prison works. I'm Reggie KRAY. I have a reputation. I have associates in here. Not many, but enough. I have people on the outside who still respect what my brother and I built. If you eliminate me, those people will find out who did it. And they will respond, not immediately, not obviously, but over time, your life in here will become hell. Accidents will happen. You'll find yourself in dangerous situations. Maybe you get hurt. Maybe something worse. But your life will never be safe again in the prison system. And that's just the immediate consequence. Here's the larger one. You're a serial killer who eliminated people you judged as evil. That's how you see yourself. That's your identity. But if you eliminate me, a man who hasn't hurt you, who hasn't threatened you until you threatened me, you're just a murderer, no different from the common criminals you despise. You'll lose the moral high ground you've built your entire identity around. You'll become exactly what you claim to hate. Peter's hands were shaking slightly. You're trying to scare me. No, I'm trying to help you see reality. You're not scared of me physically. You think you can eliminate me and get away with it. Maybe you can. But can you live with becoming what you hate? Can you maintain your sense of moral superiority after eliminating someone who posed no threat to you? That's what should scare you. Not me, but what you'll become. There was a long silence in that room. Peter Sullivan staring at Reggie KRAY. Reggie calmly waiting. Finally, Peter spoke. Why are you doing this? Why not just have your people handle me? Why talk to me at all? Reggie leaned forward. Because I'm tired, Peter. I'm tired of violence. I've been involved in violence for 40 years. It's exhausting. It's destructive. It's ultimately pointless. I'm spending the rest of my life in prison because of violence. And now, at 44 years old, I've come to understand something. Violence doesn't solve problems. It just creates new ones. You threatened me. The old Reggie KRAY would have had you hurt, would have sent a message through violence. But I'm trying to be different now. Trying to use words instead of violence. Trying to actually solve problems rather than just creating new cycles of revenge and retaliation. So I'm talking to you, trying to make you understand why your plan is wrong, why it will hurt you more than it hurts me. Not because I'm afraid of you, but because I'm hoping you're smart enough to reconsider. Peter was quiet for another long moment. And if I don't reconsider? If I still decide to go through with it? Reggie's expression hardened slightly. Then I defend myself. And I promise you, Peter, I'm very good at defending myself. You'll find that eliminating a gangster who survived in this world for 4 decades is much harder than eliminating civilians who never saw you coming. But I'm hoping we don't get to that point. I'm hoping you're intelligent enough to recognize that what I'm saying makes sense. That your mission to eliminate evil doesn't include eliminating me. That you can walk away from this threat. Focus your energy on something more productive. Like what? Like understanding why you feel the need to eliminate people in the first place. Like examining whether your moral certainty is justified. Like considering whether there are better ways to address evil in the world than taking lives. You studied psychology, right? You should understand that your need to eliminate people you judge as evil probably comes from something deeper. Maybe trauma. Maybe a need for control in a chaotic world. Maybe something else, but it's worth examining. The guard knocked on the door. Time's up. 10 minutes. Reggie stood up, extended his hand to Peter. So what's it going to be? Are we going to spend the next however many years in this prison as enemies? Or can we call this settled? Peter looked at the offered hand, looked at Reggie's face, saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine concern. Not fear, not manipulation. Just one human being trying to connect with another. Peter slowly stood up, shook Reggie's hand. It's settled, Peter said quietly. I won't pursue this further. Good. And Peter, if you ever want to talk about your cases, about your moral philosophy, about why you do what you do, I'm willing to listen. No judgment, no ulterior motive, just conversation. Why would you offer that? Because I think you're more interesting than you are dangerous. And because in here, we've got nothing but time. Might as well spend it trying to understand each other rather than trying to hurt each other. The guard opened the door. Both men walked out separately, returned to their cells. Peter Sullivan never threatened Reggie KRAY again, never attempted to harm him. In fact, over the following months, Peter occasionally accepted Reggie's offer to talk. They had several conversations about philosophy, about morality, about the nature of evil. Reggie wasn't trying to justify his own crimes. He acknowledged what he'd done and accepted his punishment, but he challenged Peter's certainty, made Peter question whether his role as judge and executioner was as righteous as he'd believed. In 1980, Peter Sullivan wrote a letter to the court expressing remorse for his crimes, particularly for the politician he now believed he'd wrongly eliminated. The letter was the first time Peter had expressed any doubt about his actions. Peter remained in prison until his death in 2004, at age 69, from cancer. He never eliminated anyone else, never resumed his role as a self-appointed executioner of evil. Reggie KRAY, when asked about Peter Sullivan in a 1995 interview, said, Peter was a dangerous man when I met him, not because he was physically threatening, but because he was morally certain. He believed absolutely that he was right, and everyone he judged as evil deserved to die. That kind of certainty is more dangerous than any weapon. What I tried to do in our conversation was introduce doubt, make him question his certainty. Not because I wanted to manipulate him, but because I genuinely believed his certainty was destroying him. And I think it worked. He never threatened anyone again after our talk. So you saved his potential victims? Maybe. Or maybe I just helped a confused man realize he wasn't qualified to judge who deserved to live or die. Either way, no one got hurt. That makes it good at outcome. The story of Peter Sullivan and Reggie KRAY is unusual in prison lore. It's a story where violence was threatened but never occurred, where a confrontation was resolved through conversation rather than force. It's also a story about moral complexity. Peter Sullivan saw himself as righteous, eliminating evil people who'd escaped justice. Reggie KRAY saw himself as practical, doing what was necessary in a criminal world. Both men had done terrible things. Both had taken lives. Both were serving long sentences. But in that 10-minute conversation, something changed. Peter's certainty was shaken. His mission was derailed, not through threats or violence, but through questions and psychology. Reggie KRAY, the gangster, the murderer, the man who'd terrorized London, had talked down a serial killer through philosophy and reason, had prevented violence by addressing the psychology behind it. It was perhaps the most redemptive moment in Reggie KRAY's entire life. A moment where he used his intelligence not to hurt but to help, not to destroy but to diffuse. A serial killer confronted Reggie KRAY, threatened to eliminate him. But Reggie smiled, and 10 minutes later, through nothing but conversation, the threat was gone. Sometimes words really are more powerful than violence. That wraps it up for today, August 1978. Parkhurst Prison. Serial killer Peter Sullivan threatened Reggie KRAY publicly. Said he'd eliminate the famous gangster. Everyone expected violence. Instead, Reggie requested a conversation. 10 minutes, private, supervised. In that conversation, Reggie didn't threaten Peter, didn't intimidate him. Instead, challenged his moral certainty, made him question whether he was qualified to judge who deserved to die. Introduced doubt where there had been absolute certainty. By the end of 10 minutes, Peter agreed to drop the threat, never pursued it again. Reggie KRAY, gangster and murderer, had talked down a serial killer through psychology and philosophy, proving that sometimes intelligence beats violence. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Subscribe for more true stories where words changed everything. See you in the next one.